Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. As we know, ever since the Cold War integration took place here in Warzone, the meta has been kinda rough. And by kinda rough, I mean the DMR, the Diamattis, and the MAC-10 are pretty much all you see, unless you just haven't gotten your loadout yet. It's not great, to say the least. But I think it's pretty obvious that some major nerfs are coming up soon for those weapons to pretty much just balance things out in general. And when that happens, the meta might become very, very interesting, because some brand new weapon stats were just found by TrueGameData, and honestly, it changes a lot of perspectives that we had on certain weapons. So as we go through it all today, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new to the channel, or if you're not already subscribed, I am always covering the latest Call of Duty news, intel, updates, all that stuff. So if you like what you see, feel free to subscribe and maybe even turn on those post notifications. Now, like I said, this is all courtesy of TrueGameData, so huge shout out to him. I'm gonna leave a link to his video on the subject, his channel, and then also his website down in the description. Basically, if you didn't know, on the TrueGameData site, you can look at various weapon stats and setups and see their TTK over certain ranges. You can see how they compare to other weapons. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff there, and it is super helpful when it comes to testing out loadouts and class setups in general, so huge props here. This guy is a wizard when it comes to all the weapon intel. But anyways, leading up to the past few days when all this new info surfaced, we were all under the assumption that the Modern Warfare weapons had these same weapon properties in multiplayer, and then also in Warzone as well, since they're being played off of the same game, they're on the same engine, so on and so forth. So we all thought that when things were nerfed and damage ranges were reduced or buffed, it affected both multiplayer and Warzone all the same. But lo and behold, that just is not the case now. In fact, a lot of weapons have Warzone specific damage drop-offs, and this actually affects a ton of stuff, especially the perspective and ideas that we had about certain weapons not being as good as they once were. So currently, things like the AN94, the AMAX, the FAL, the Grau, the Bruin, the M91, the MP7, and even the Bison all have their own specific range and damage drop-offs for Warzone. And keep in mind, that's not even all the weapons that have it, that's only a handful of them. At the same time, some weapons don't actually have a Warzone specific drop-off, or Warzone specific drop-offs rather. The Kilo, the Odin, the AK, they all don't. So what you see in Modern Warfare multiplayer with weapons like those is also what you see in Warzone as well. It's 1-to-1, pretty basic. But obviously, the big difference here is the fact that a lot of these weapons are now significantly better in gunfights across the board than we once assumed. So for instance, looking at the Grau here, my personal favorite rifle in the game, and by the way, the graphs that you guys are seeing on screen are from TrueGameData.com, but looking at the Grau, we've got the Warzone Grau versus the multiplayer Grau, and the initial TTK per distance is the same up through about 50 meters, right? But then you see the multiplayer Grau, the pink line here, it spikes up at 50 meters and then it takes longer to kill at that point. Whereas the Warzone Grau has no last steep drop off like that. That last drop off now is not factored in like it was before, when we all assumed the Grau was only so good up until 50 meters and then it severely fell off. Also, for what it's worth, these are the base weapon stats, and everything we look at today will be under the base weapon stats. So things like the monolithic suppressor and the range extending barrels aren't factored in here initially. But moving on, same deal with the RAM here. We've got the orange line for multiplayer, pink for Warzone this time, and right around like that 42-43 meter mark, the multiplayer RAM would drop off, and then you need another shot to get a kill. Whereas in Warzone, once again, that damage drop off doesn't end up happening, and in turn, it is just a consistent decrease as you get further and further out from your enemy that you're engaging. So obviously, you all know the RAM is a beast up close, and it's been a very dominant close and medium range weapon for quite some time now. However, this proves that even at a longer range, the RAM isn't necessarily a bad choice whatsoever, because it actually doesn't have that super severe drop off. Yeah, the recoil becomes a bit harder to keep steady when your target gets smaller at that longer range, but if you are hitting your shots, it's going to be a lot better than we previously assumed. Then continuing on, let's take this a step further. With all this new info in mind, and with the Warzone specific profiles that we've got on the TrueGameData site, we can look at 3 weapons that have all been the best rifle at some point: the AMAX, the Kilo, and then also the Grau as well. Now you'll see here we have the AMAX in orange, the Kilo in pink, and then also the Grau in like the teal color. And the Kilo acts just like it would in multiplayer, as we said before, so it has no specific profile, and the drop off here is actually pretty severe when you get to around that 50 to 55 meter range. It has that last drop off that you don't see on the AMAX or the Grau, or a lot of other Warzone specific profiles for that matter. Now the Grau is actually very similar to the Kilo all the way through that 50 to 55 meter range, where it doesn't drop off and its TTK per range is actually a lot better than the Kilos. So for those saying, yeah, the Grau just isn't worth it anymore, it hasn't been good in months, well, now it's actually better than the Kilo, which, as we know, is still a top 2 rifle at the moment, or so we thought was a top 2 rifle at the moment. Then you also have the AMAX in there, which is pretty much just some cheese. The damage drop off here is very minimal. You get that one initial one, and then it's just a consistent fall off for the shots to kill and the TTK overall. This just shows how good the AMAX actually is. It is easily the best assault rifle in the game, and then after the DMR is nerfed, I definitely expect this to be the #1 gun once again. But overall, this new info changes a lot. You know, previously the rifles in the game, and obviously this video is mainly focused on the assault rifles just because that's really the most consistent weapon class when it comes to having dominant weapons in it. But in the assault rifle category previously, a lot of people thought the Kilo and the AMAX were the top 2 rifles, and yeah, at one point they were. This previous Kilo nerf is really what changed up a lot here, and it was that case for quite some time. The Kilo and the AMAX were the go-tos. But now, we all know the Kilo has that extra damage drop-off, and things like the Grau, the M4, even the Ram 7 are actually way better than it at a longer range. In turn, those weapons are actually technically more meta than the Kilo currently. Obviously, you also have to factor in ease of use with the other weapons too, so like recoil versus the Kilo, mobility versus the Kilo, so on and so forth. However, for the most part, I think this information completely changes how we were looking at the meta before. We were definitely viewing certain weapons as way better than they initially were, and on the contrary, some weapons we were looking at as way worse than they actually are now. So safe to say, once the DMR and the Diamati and the MAC-10 are adjusted and the meta actually becomes playable once again, things are going to change quite a bit, and personally, I'm here for it. I am all about it. But yeah, there you have it. With all of that being said, that is effectively how Warzone's meta just changed in some pretty major ways. And again, huge shout out and thank you to TrueGameData for sharing this info. Major props to him. Be sure to go and check him out. But that is going to wrap things up for today. If you enjoyed the video, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new here and you want to stay up to date with the latest Call of Duty news, intel, updates, and pretty much everything else in between, feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. That way you'll always know whenever I upload a new video. As always, if you want to check out any of my partners, be sure to use code IMMORTAL for a spicy discount on all Scuff, G Fuel, and Control Freak products, and the links for all that can be found down in the description below. But once again, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.